So, William, so excited to have a chat today about all the process and all the ins and outs of the book that you co-authored with Stan. Yay!
I'm very excited too. Thanks for having me, Lee.
So I know all of these questions, but it'd be really great for people to understand the whole process that you have that you contributed to the book. So, can you tell us about, like, maybe a bit about your background first, and then we can move into how you then ended up meeting Stan and then writing his book for him?
Absolutely. So my background is in journalism. As you can probably hear by my Pommy accent, I was brought up in the UK and I studied journalism there and worked in radio for many years, doing news reading, reporting, some presenting as well. I then moved to Australia, originally on a working holiday in 2006. For some reason, 20 years later, I'm still here. Although I've done a lot of radio, I've done some print as well. But if you'd told me 12, 11 years ago that I would have written a book, I don't think I would have believed you, because I was always saying, broadcasting is my first love. Now, how did I meet Stan? Well, that was quite by chance. I went to a pub, a bar on Oxford Street in Sydney called the Midnight Shift. It's no longer there, it's now called Universal. And they had a woman called Colleen Windsor, who'd been in Les Girls in Sydney, which is where Stan was to compere for quite a long time in Sydney and Melbourne. And she did a number, she did a bit of a dance, and I put a photo of her on Facebook, a lovely black and white photo. Suddenly, somebody called Stan Munro leaves a comment and says, I would love someone to write my life story. Would you be interested? And I'm there thinking, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself in for? But naively, I said yes. And he said, are you sure? I said, okay, yes, I will. And we had a phone call, and Stan obviously was wary. I was a bit wary. It's like talking to a school mistress. But we broke down the barrier. And I went up to Kyogle a short time after, met Stan, and I have two memories. The first thing at the airport he said to me was, and he was flummoxed because he couldn't find me, even though the flight was on time. He got very panicky and he goes, you look bigger than in your photos. Then we went out that very same evening to a local pub and had dinner. He had a steak. And at the end of the meal, he thought it was burnt and too well done. And he flings it on the counter and says, I'm not having this. And I was thinking, what have I got myself into? Oh, William, you naughty boy. You can't keep saying yes to everybody. But that's how I met Stan. But there is a little caveat here. Back in 2005, 2006, I think it was Channel 9, they did a TV show called The Best of Bert Newton. And during the show, there was a clip of Bert in the early 1970s on the Graham Kennedy show. And he was interviewing a drag queen. I didn't know at the time that that drag performer was Stan Munro. And I thought, this guy is so funny. This queen is hilarious. And I was writing down Stan's jokes, not realising who it was. And all these years later, Stan's become arguably one of my best friends.
And that's it. It's to actually sit down and write someone's story, but you didn't even know him. He's just, I've got a story. Do you want to write it?
Stan is very direct, and that's one of the things I love about Stan. Is it's not always a good thing, but it often works with Stan. He lacks a filter. So if he
I was
wants
just
something,
about to say that
he
there
says
is
it.
no filter.
Not at all. And it can be a bit of a shock. And when I first met him, I had a few eccentric friends who were a bit quirky. So I was prepared, but I don't think anything fully prepares you for Stan.
And I think too is there, because obviously we have met obviously just before we've published the book, so I know you've had 10, 11 years of becoming really good friends now with Stan. So was there anything when you were writing his story that really just like really stood out, or like there probably was a lot of things that you didn't know? Was there anything that you just sort of went, oh wow, like what has this man gone through, or like something that was really quite shocking, I guess?
I think you've summed it up in your question. There were many shocks, because what you see of Stan when he's performing is the happy Stan, the showbiz Stan, the glitz and the glamour, the neon lights. But of course, Stan's been through so much. He's been through conversion therapy, he's experienced police corruption, he's been assaulted by the police, he's been arrested, he's been entrapped. This I knew nothing about him. He's been sexually abused, and all of these stories brought up trauma in Stan. And particularly when he was arrested by the police and he was assaulted by them, basically punched in the face, and he was terrified and they pretty much threatened to kill him, and he ended up having to bribe them. This was the first time he'd talked about that in something like 30, 40 years, and he was on the phone on tears to me. He was absolutely crying, and I hadn't seen this side to Stan. He was able to talk about the conversion therapy, but his experiences with the police were particularly tough. And I had to say to Stan, are you sure you want to talk about this? And he said, I need to. I need to have that outlet. This is a chance to explain what I've been through and many people have been through. So it was tough listening to it, but it must have been even tougher for Stan.
And I think too, when people go through a trauma, they essentially just shut the door on that and leave it. So this probably would have been a really great, again, outlet. But I think with the trauma as well, when you start to actually recognize it and realize it wasn't your doing, it was somebody else's, that can also be a great release as well. So I know every time we've been interviewed with Stan, that's something that he really gets quite emotional about. So it's still quite raw, even though it was like 40, 50 years ago.
And I think it's important to have all of that in a book. Otherwise, it just becomes glitz and glamour. There's happy showbiz story. But also we talk about Stan's eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia. We talk about his nervous breakdown, his depression. And I think there's something for everybody in the book. Some people will say to me, oh, I love the name dropping. He knew Danny LaRue. He knew Sir Robert Helpman. And then others say to me the bits they enjoyed the most were him talking about his breakdown and depression, because they'd experienced it, or people close to them had experienced it.
And this is the thing, when you meet someone, like, you see the amazing life that he's had, but you also see the whole other side of it. So this is where that persona of people, they show up every day. He's the brightest man in Kyoga walking down the street, and he doesn't show the wear and tear of all the bad stuff that he's gone through. So this is where it's really important to understand a person is who they are to you, but it's what they've had in their past. So was there anything in the story that essentially that you wrote and then maybe was removed? Like, we don't need to talk about what was removed, but was there stories that you sort of felt weren't really what needed to go in it? Either
yes.
A bit raw, or do you want to expand a little bit more on that?
Some of the more saucier stuff we left out. There's enough of it in already, trust me, but some of it we left out. There was also some of the information about other people in his life, and when we decided to cut down on the word count, we thought, we don't need to know about that other person's sex life. Yes, they were in your life, but we don't need to know who they were into. We don't need to know where they went to get action. We don't need to know that. And it's better to be safe, because Stan's happy to own his story. But of course, when somebody else's story is intertwined with Stan's, you've also got to think of them, and you've got to think of their families. So a few of the people, in fact, he had relationships. We didn't tone it down, but we didn't necessarily give all the details, because they really added nothing to the story. And if you think they did, if any reader thinks they did, well, you've got a very vivid imagination.
Well, that's it. It leaves the room for the mind to be open as well.
Exactly.
So is there anything that, like, can you talk us through the process of how you started to document the story, and did you have much input into it? Like, were you doing research? Do you want to sort of talk about, again, the essential, like the putting together on your part? I know it was over a massive period of time, but it'd just be great for people to understand when they want to publish somebody else's story or their own, a bit of the process that you went through over the 10 years.
So with Stan, we had a lot of phone calls. I paid him several visits. We made a lot of recordings. I've got a huge archive of recordings. Some of it's in the book, some of it's not. But it was also very important because Stan, he's an amazing person. He really is. But he's also, like me, like everybody, we're all a bit flawed. Sometimes we forget things. We might get dates muddled up, a few details. So I would check some things, like the details of Les Girls, where he worked and compared independently. I spoke to some of the other Les Girls as well. And to get details and to check on things like what colour were the tablecloths. Was the club pretty much painted in red? Was red a common theme? Trying to get ideas about people, and of course matching dates and things like that. You can never be 100%, because although this is a valuable piece of history, it's Stan's story and everything written is in good faith, but I've done my best to independently research a lot of what he said. And I've also checked, there is a character, and I'm not going to say who they are in the book, there's a chapter very much devoted to them, and Stan is often quite critical, but I spoke to other people who knew that person or had worked with them, and they all backed up Stan's version. And I thought, yeah, we've got to go with this, because we were going to tone down what we wrote about, but we thought, and I thought after listening to his story and speaking to others, we need to keep it in. But one thing I will say about Stan is he was very easy to work with. If I wasn't comfortable about something, he had no problem me taking out. If I thought maybe we could include that, he had no issue. I have friends who've worked with other people on their stories, and they've been, I don't want to say controlling, but they've been very specific. Got to do it this way, got to do it that way. And as a result, it has in some ways hampered the working relationship. But with me and Stan, it's very much been a team.
And I also love certain parts in there as well. It literally sounds like Stan speaking it, where that's where I know that he's had such a massive input in it, where, like you said, some people just go, no, it has to be written like this. So keeping that tone and some of the language and crude humour that he, like, there's been a few words he said to me, I'm like, I don't even know what that is. He goes, I'll educate you.
Well, it's been an education, and I must say that one of the things people have said is that they can hear Stan's voice. And this is quite funny. I go to the gym, I do dance classes. One of the people in my dance classes brought the book, has almost finished it, got to chapter 19, there's 20 chapters, and she said she could hear Stan's voice. And that's what it's about. It's not my voice. It's Stan's voice. And it's like method acting. I know that sounds a bit swanky and all that, but it's like method acting. You've got to get into the person's mind. You've got to think like them. You've got to write like they would. You've got to speak like they would.
And that's it. It's essentially, it's like having a ghostwriter. If they're writing your story, you essentially aren't the one writing the story. So that's what I really loved about, again, the research and all of the interviews and everything that you've put in there. You've really kept it his story. And even when you talk to him down the street, he has so much clarity still at 85 on these moments like they were yesterday. So it's hearing what he says about something, knowing that I've read the book too, it's just exactly like he actually wrote it himself.
It is. You've talked about him walking down the street in Kyogle in his rainbow-coloured T-shirt, but for anybody who reads the book, they'll understand why he's like that. They'll understand why he's so friendly and chatty to everybody. I'm not going to say why, but let's just say he loves people. He loves being around people. He does not want to be on his own. And I totally get that.
And along the journey as well, I know you wrote the book, you used a couple of editors as well. So how did you find your experience with having two different editors?
It was invaluable. It was crucial. So the first editor we had was Keith Howes, who's a British journalist based in Sydney, who's written books himself. And in 2019, he looked at the first draft. He suggested changing the order. He suggested things that were not needed, or maybe even things, because I'd spoken to him a lot about Stan's story, that could be added. And I have to admit, that first draft that he looked at, I wouldn't say I was defensive, but I was like, oh, that's the work I've put in and you want to change things. But you can't be like that. Otherwise, it's pointless having an editor. Then a few years later, maybe 3 or 4, we found the wonderful Kevin Markwell, who's an academic and also an author who has lived in the Northern Rivers region for many years, where Kyogle is. And he came on board, and I don't want to say a hatchet job, but he really pulled it apart in the best possible way. We managed to get rid of 20,000 words. We changed the orders of things. We got rid of some stories, obviously. And his advice, I would say I took probably 95% of it on. There were a couple of things I thought we should keep or I didn't want to change, but 95%. And getting editors is so important. And even though Keith was a friend of mine, he's always been somebody who's very honest. I think you've got to get people who are writers, who know about writing, who know about editing, to look at your book. If you just get a good friend, they're likely to tell you, oh, this is amazing, I love it. Or let be one of those very critical friends. We've often have one or two in our lives who will just pull it apart. You've got to let people be objective about it. And you don't have to take everything on board. You don't have to. But listen and think carefully why they've made those changes, because you do need another eye to look at it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Along my writing journey, I wrote a story and gave it to an editor, and she just said, all right, this particular topic, there's thousands of books about it. How can you make this any different? And I took it to heart and went, I don't want to hear your feedback. And this is when it's like, well, I gave it to her for my feedback, but I was struggling to receive it. And this is where a lot of authors I've been working with, especially of late, I've just done a book for someone. She's had the story for 20 years. And she said, I was always told that I wasn't worthy. So the moment she had a little bit of criticism, she didn't know how to take that. And I hear about the story a lot from people who have already published as well, but it's really important to listen to what they say. You may not agree, but it's okay to take on their advice and again, take what resonates and leave the rest. But I love that you used two different ones as well, because there would have been two different perspectives. But I think I didn't realise Kevin actually pulled 95% of the book to pieces.
No. I mean, I took 95% of his recommendations on board, but he, thanks to him, took away 20,000 words and we reordered some things. And you know, both those editors, I think it's a better book, largely because of them. And I'm incredibly grateful. And they donated so much of their time. They did not have to. I would not have been offended if they did not, but they agreed to take that on board. And it's a big job reading a book and then having to offer feedback in detail. Keith was really good, and Kevin in particular. He was so intricate in his suggestions and how he rewrote things, and I'm grateful to both of them. Thank you.
So, what was the most enjoyable part, other than becoming Stan being one of your best friends? What would be one of them, or if there's a couple of really enjoyable moments that you have along this journey?
Having an insight into our queer LGBTQI plus history from somebody who was there, somebody who's giving you, and it was thousands of hours of their time, not just sharing their story, but sharing our history. In the UK at the beginning of the book, Sydney, Melbourne, Kyogle, Castlemaine. It's actually a privilege to be able to hear that firsthand, because Stan is now 85 and he gave so much of his time. I know he wanted his story, but I learned so much, not just about Stan, but so much that I didn't know. And that's an absolute honour, and I'll always be thankful for that. So I think that's the main thing, but also meeting people through Stan that I probably would never have met. I probably would never have met you, Leanne. I probably would never have met many of Stan's friends. I wouldn't have met the brilliant Kevin Markwell, one of our editors. So it's the friends I've made, the people I've got to know, and I'm so thankful.
Well, that's Stan. He's just bringing everyone together because he knows everyone.
It's so true. Stan's like that. He loves being around people. He loves people. He loves to be loved. He loves to love people. And he loves bringing people together as well.
Oh, 100%. And this is where, when I got introduced to Stan, going on to where the publishing side of things was. So I'd met, because I was only new to the area as well, so I think I'd only been here about 4 months. And Wendy down at Clay Corner had said, I've got this friend. He's looking for a publisher, and who do you use? And I said, I actually publish my own stuff. And within 2 hours, I had a phone call, and I think a couple of days later, we had a meeting with Stan, and he's like, all right, so when can you do this? I turn 85 in January, and I think this might have been the September. I think it was from memory.
It was September.
And he just goes, so I'm 85 in January. We'll be ready by then? And it was every week. Is it ready? Is it ready? I'm like,
it was amazing.
It's not like we did do it in a very short amount of time. I know you were overseas, so we waited for you to come back, and then we met, and I'm like, yep, we can move forward with it. But it was lucky that majority of it was done, so it was just we were able to get it out and ready for his launch the same week as his 85th birthday.
It was serendipity, wasn't it? Because you came into our life at the right time. Stan really wanted a book out there. He was often telling me, do you think we're ever going to find a publisher? And then you came along. Whereas if I'd gone with a couple of possible publishers maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, we wouldn't have had the later stories of his show that he did, Vintage Drag in Mint Condition with Kevin, Backroads on the ABC, Queer Australia on the ABC, the recent show he did last year with Mark Fennell, and the cover, Jodie Harris's cover. Isn't it wonderful? Absolutely. I love that. Everything came together at the right time, serendipity, and I love it. It's been really good. And that cover by Jodie Harris, the colours, you've got Stan half in drag, half himself out of drag. I think you've got that change, that transformation, and the colours. I mean, it's so camp. And look at the back, there's rainbow. It's bright. It's
one of the brightest books I think I've ever done.
It grabs the reader, and people comment on the cover. As I said, my friend at the gym said, I love the colour. It grabs you immediately. The whole cover, everything about it. And you've got Carlotta up there endorsing it as well. What more could you want?
Well, I know with the cover, he had this particular image that he was really set on. And I said, it really has to be a high res. It was quite a pixelated photo. And I said, just to even copy that. So I think it's really important with a cover as well to have something that really grabs people, where this was just like a glamour shot that he had done. Still a great photo, but when you, again, capturing what Jodie's captured in that cover is just generations of his life, but it's such a beautiful image.
There's so much in that photo. If you look in the background, you can see photos of Stan. I think there's one with him, the black and white one. That's Sir Robert Helpman, that you can see the actor. And it just covers so much of Stan's life in that photo. And of course, Jodie's photo was, I believe, a finalist in a competition, and also has been touring galleries around Australia. I think that's amazing.
It's definitely one of the good choices. I was glad everyone was on board with, because it just, as I said, it really captures exactly who he is now, but essentially with the drag in there as well. So if you were to go back and change anything along this process, or was there any sort of real lessons that you learned, I guess?
Huge lessons.
In regards to this, yep.
Huge lessons.
Sort of think that someone could really value some...
It's to be realistic. So a lot of people, including when I was at the recent wonderful Kyogle Readers and Writers Festival, people had a book and people put it on forums. I've got a book. I want to get it into one of the big bookshops. I want to get a publisher. We all think, many of us think we've got an amazing book in us. But you have to think, who is that book going to interest? Who is your target market? Is somewhere like Dimmock's actually going to sell it when they must have hundreds, thousands of people each week wanting to get their book in their shops? You've got to be realistic. And I was saying to somebody the other day on a forum, consider self-publishing, consider hybrid publishing, because 3 or 4 years ago, I was quite dismissive of that. I was determined to find a traditional publisher. And I wrote to probably 10, 11, 12 publishers. We had another person come along who lives near Kyogle who also wrote to the same publishers. That's wonderful. But in the end, I had to say, it's flogging a dead horse. You came along and it's all worked out. And here we are. I mean, look at this. A year ago, we did not have this. I'm so happy. So do not dismiss traditional publishing. Well, don't dismiss traditional publishing, but definitely don't dismiss hybrid or self-publishing, because if you want your book out there, you need to get it out there. Otherwise, you could be waiting 20, 25 years. And my friend Kevin Markwell, who helped edit the book, one of the things he said to me, it's a lottery with traditional publishers. It's often who you know. It's whether it arrives on somebody's desk at the right time. Are you going to be waiting forever? Do you want to grow really old? Stan is 85, but do you want to grow really old until your life story is published? No. And we found you, Leanne, and you've been fantastic. You've been brilliant. You've been supportive. You've put so much hard work in, and I highly recommend you completely.
Thank you. Going back on some of in regards to the traditional publishing as well, a lot of people do get traditionally published, and a lot of the things are changed. So it's actually understanding, if you self-publish, you actually have a lot more control over it, where when you go down the traditional road, they can change your story, they can change your cut, you can actually lose any more feedback on that story. And I've known of some people who have had their story changed to the point of they're like, I'm a bit disappointed because I sort of lost, my input wasn't there. So it really is important to sort of, if you have a story that you're happy for people to change, and you want to go down that traditional road, but if you're really set where this is something, you can't really change this is his life story. So to have so much input, like I know he loved the day that I rang him and said, I think we need to use Jodie's photo. And he goes, oh, that's a beautiful photo. But he was still a bit like, oh, I did have that other one set in my head. And I said, that's okay. We can pop that one on the back. And so now I've kept it on the back because that was something that I don't know what that photo means to him, or it could have been the period of time that it was taken, but he really wanted that on there. So we were able to work with, okay, let's pop that on the back, and then we'll put this as the front image for everyone to be able to see. So how do you, obviously 10 years ago, you wouldn't have thought you'd be where you are now. So how does it feel to be a published author? Like, I know that you're sort of looking at working on some of your own things now where that wouldn't have happened if this hadn't come into your life.
So one of the first things I did, I went on my Instagram profile and added it to the word author. It's one word, but it was like, woo! I just felt great. Tick. And when I came back from the launch to Sydney after Kyogo, the launch in January, I felt, I'm an author. It's weird. And people have come up to me asking me for advice on writing and finding publishers in the process. And it's like, wow. I mean, one of the most rewarding experiences was when I was at the Kyogo Readers and Writers Festival in May, and people were approaching me in the street. One wonderful woman sat down with me, and she had I won't say her story, but her mother's story was a very powerful story, and she wanted to get her mother's story out there. And I just sat with her for about 15, 20 minutes giving her advice. That's not something I probably would have been asked for 10, well, even a year ago. So I'm very grateful for people who come up to me and ask for advice. I don't pretend to be an expert on the issue, but as somebody who has written a book, who has gone through that process and journey, I think I should share advice, because I asked people for advice and some of them were brilliant. But there was one author, I won't name him, who I wrote to. I bought his book. I never heard back from him. I wrote to him on Instagram. I wrote to him on Hotmail, on email. I wrote to him, I think, through Facebook. Never heard a word. And I felt very let down. I know people are busy, but even a couple of lines. So I always make an effort to get back to people.
Well, that's one thing. I love feedback, good or bad. And that's one thing, anyone who bought the book, I said, like, I would love your feedback. And I emailed every single person that had bought the book on the website, thinking I might maybe get maybe a good 5 testimonials. I had an email back from nearly every single person. Some of them writing, I'm only halfway through, but I can tell you now it's going to be a great But I want to finish it before I can give advice. But
That's
some
brilliant.
people had read it and then they're like, I'm halfway through reading it again. Like
Wow.
they were loving just learning so much more about Stan. And this is what I mean. You know Stan as Stan, but to actually know the life that he has also led. And that's one thing that really drew me in. Like, I know we sort of had that discussion. I was a bit worried about taking on the book because I hadn't done anything in that sort of genre before. But I have within trauma and people telling their trauma stories. So when I started reading it, I realised that he actually understood and spoke about his life and understood that it actually stemmed from some trauma, that he is the person that he is. So I loved how raw the book was, because for other people that experience those sorts of things as well, it can be a real realisation. Like, I got some information, like read some of the parts that he read in there, and I went, that just makes so much sense, that it didn't click to me before. So I know a lot of people sort of say, oh, I'm not really into those sorts of books. And I'm like, it's actually quite a great story just to hear his life in the limelight. But then also, there's also the darker sides of his, like things that had happened and what he actually overcome, but then still just got up and run to get where he is again.
It covers a lot of ground. Like I mentioned earlier, some people latch onto the showbiz and the big names, others the depression, the eating disorders, the police corruption, conversion therapy. It covers a lot of ground because Stan's life covers so much ground. And there is the trauma. And I had a friend who's maybe 10, 11 years younger than Stan, who was writing her life story, and she stopped because she said it was too traumatic. But there's something else people need to take on board. If they're writing other people's stories, they've also got to have self-care too, because you can be taking on somebody else's trauma. Thankfully, I'm able to stay with most things pretty detached, so I was able to handle Stan's story quite well. But it could traumatize people, particularly if they've been through those experiences. So as an author, remember, whether it's your story or the person you're writing about, remember, self-care must come first.
It is very important. And again, things can raise or come up where, again, that trigger, like I said, there was that one thing. It wasn't a trigger for me, but it was something that I went, that actually explains a lot about the person that he is, and understanding that, again, we all have these traits, but it's how they actually are formed. So I know you and Stan, so obviously we had our launch in Kyogle, and then you and Stan have been to Castlemaine, and you've been down to Melbourne to Hares and Hyenas, and then we had the Kyogle Readers and Writers Festival. So what has probably been a couple of the highlights through, or things that you've learned, I guess, throughout those few little events? And
there's been many highlights, but one thing I just want to add to my previous point is, yes, self-care is crucial, but also be aware of the person you're writing about. If you're doing interviews with them, be sensitive, because you might be awakening traumas, they might be awakening traumas. So go at your pace, but also their pace as well. Highlights. So many. Meeting people, travelling to places, being able to host events with Stan, being on the stage with Stan, meeting people he's worked with maybe 40, 50 years ago, to actually meet these people, some of whom are mentioned in the book. It's been an absolute delight, and that's what I've enjoyed. And seeing people go up, buy the book, not just buy it, but ask us about it, sit with Stan, chat like old times. That's what I've enjoyed the most. The fact that people have taken an interest in Stan's life. It's not my life, I know that. But knowing that people are enjoying something that I wrote alongside Stan is an enormous sense of achievement. And those have been the highlights. There were so many to mention.
And that's it. You really are the one. If Stan didn't find you, he wouldn't have been able to get this done himself. Like, yes, he could record his stories, but having someone collate them. So you've been a massive part in him being able to get his journey out there as well. So that's, again, 11 years of your life you've put into it. You are just as much to be congratulated for as well. As Stan.
But it's been, as I say, a team effort. Stan has given me a platform too. You've given me a platform, Leanne. We've had wonderful people like Keith and Kevin editing the book. We've had people like Carlotta endorse it. Mark Trevorrow, also Bob Down, as he's also known, endorsing it. David Mitchell, who's a producer, who's worked on it. Craig Bennett, who did the foreword. We've had people like Linda helping get the book out there. Jodie with this fantastically colourful cover. It's been a team. I know Stan and I have done most of the work, Stan and me, but we've had people like you, Leanne, and Jodie and Carlotta and others who've been part of the team. We couldn't have done it alone. It's all been like a jigsaw, fitting everything together, and it's worked out. And I'm so proud of this. I really am. Thank you.
As I said, it's been a very exciting journey. So have you got plans to sort of do your own work now? Are you I know obviously you said you want to, it's been a very big 11 years and a very big few months since we've launched with all the events and all of those sorts of things. So have you got plans to be able to speak a bit more on the journey that you've had to help other people, or are you looking at doing your own? What sort of things have you got?
I would love to do more talks about the book. I know later in the year we're hoping to do one in Sydney. I will take any offers regarding that because I really want to get the book out there, particularly not just to regional Australia where it's important, but places like Sydney and Melbourne. I'm also taking some copies to London as well soon. I would love to help others because people helped me and I want to give something back. And I'm not just saying that to sound worthy. It's not an empty gesture. I would love to help give people advice. I'm not an expert, but I can talk from my own experience. And if that just helps one or two people, I'm extremely happy with that. I would love to do more book festivals. It's going to be a while until I work on another book, but I have a couple of ideas in mind. It will be different. It'll probably be something like true crime. It won't be somebody similar to Stan. I need a change because I don't know if you found this, Leanne, but I found it, and I was warned about this. As soon as you write somebody's story, you'll have people approaching you saying, can you write my story? And I've had to say, I need a break from writing. I really need a break from writing. You've got to be honest with people. One thing I've learned about this is helping people, giving them assistance, but also not just saying yes, but having the power to say no. You've got to have boundaries.
And that's it. It is about boundaries because, again, how much more time can you invest into doing other people's stories? And then that's taking things like if you want to do your own writing and those sorts of things. But I know at the Kyogle Readers and Writers Festival, just the response from people hearing, again, he did that for Stan, and questions that were asked. And this is where the magic is you're coming from a lived experience. You're not coming from, oh yeah, I think this is how it happens. And this is what people resonate with, where you could just have that one person go, look, this is like, I'm a bit stuck with this. How would you respond to that? And then again, they can take your advice, but it could be just that one moment that someone just goes, oh wow, okay, I've really taken that on. And that's what I love about speaking, having these conversations as well as speaking with other people as well, is some people are just get that little bit stuck or stuck on an idea or having this job that they think is impossible, and knowing what you achieved. Yes, I understand it was like 11 years, but still to be able to do that for somebody else, there's still hope out there for people that are able to get help.
There is.
For self-publishing as well.
And one person I must mention, who I haven't mentioned, is the person who stood by me all this time, apart from Stan, the second love of my life, my own partner, Donald. So I'm most grateful to him as well, because even though I wouldn't say this book's caused me a lot of stress, as I say, Stan's very easy to work with. But, finding a publisher and everything and going through the editing and rewriting stuff, there are times you just need to let off steam. And Donald, my partner's been a fantastic listener, and for that I'm also thankful. So thank you.
No, that's great. So thank you so much for having a chat today and allowing people to hear the whole process of how you brought this amazing book together. And also we have it available on planetarypp.com.au as well as Amazon, and there's some selected bookstores, and then obviously local in Clay Corner in Kyogle. So thanks so much, William, and so glad you're able to share your side of the story today.
It's been a joy. Please do get out there and buy a copy. Please do. We love you.